Well, I'm really excited to be out chasing big flathead again on these flats this afternoon, and I'm going to be trying something a little bit different. Topwater flathead fishing has exploded in the last couple of years especially, but there's a few lures that I reckon have hit the market that have gone a little bit unnoticed so far that might just do the trick. And so something different that these fish haven't seen this season might be a real appealing factor, and this is what I'm talking about. This Skitter V by Rapala, something I saw this at after this year, and I think it's probably got the kind of action that's going to be able to handle these big flathead, get them really interested. And what I love about it is it's got a 3-hook setup. One of the most frustrating things about these big flathead is the poor hookup rate with the big surface lures that people are using for them. But I've read a little bit about this lure, and it's got a walk the dog and a fading style of action. And the big flathead love that kind of action, that long fade, the drift off to the side. It just represents a mullet. And if you look at the profile on this thing and the finish, I think it ticks both of those boxes for a big mullet. So it's a 13 centimetre long lure. I love the big eye, a big reflective eye with that 3 treble hook up. I reckon it might just be able to pin a couple of these bigger fish. So what I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to take you through how I like to work these things and show you the action on the surface that you can get when you're fishing with these. When you look at that profile, it just, to me, it shows that it's going to be great throwing it through the air. Very streamlined action, and then you're going to be able to get that distance with this thing that a lot of other big sort of poppers and things might struggle with. So I'm fishing it with my big swim baiting setup. Let me show you how we're going to do it. You can see there's a filling tide over these flats. There's water movement happening. And that's super appealing for me. Anytime there's water movement, disturbance over the surface, I just think there's big flathead ready and feeding. So even though it's just like middle of the day sort of stuff, it is overcast, and I don't reckon they mind hitting these things over the flat. So I'm fishing about 1 foot to 2 feet of water, and with this filling tide, there's going to be some giants up in these shallows looking for a feed. I've seen some bait fish movement and scattering around here. So, oh, this thing's like a bullet, which is what you want. You want to get way out away from the boat so that you can hit those fish really unaware. It's got a great presence, and that colour, that ghost colour, would be my favourite. And you know, whites are super appealing, and pearls are always appealing for any fish. Mangrove jack, trevally, but flathead love it too. And it means that you can also see it a mile away, which is a huge appeal, because then you can look at the way that it's working on the way back. And if you see a hit, you know where your lure is in regards to whether it's hitting that lure or whether there's bait spooking in between your lure and the boat. I love the way it sits in the water. It's got a real potty mullet style of balance in it, so it's head up, and it's super floaty as well, which is great. It means that you can work it aggressively and create more disturbance without it, you know, sort of falling under the surface and then not creating that presence on top that you want. So I'm fishing with like a high rod tip, just to try and get this thing walking as best as I can and get as much line directly towards that lure and in touch with that lure as possible. So getting my line out of the water, especially when there's a running tide underneath me here, that just gives me the best chance of getting the best aggressive action with that walk the dog style. And also when there's a hook up, if there's a take, I'm in touch with the lure and I'm not trying to carry up slack that's drifted away with the tide as I'm sort of stalling and retrieving the lure. Now, if this style of fishing for big flathead really interests you, chasing them on top water with these big lures, and you haven't seen giant flathead in the shallows, that's my latest full-length DVD, and it's available as a digital download. I'll put a link in the bottom of this description for this video which takes you through. It's probably captured the most incredible surface fishing action for flathead that's available out there, and I go right through the details on how to fish for big flathead with surface lures. But look, in basic terms, what you're trying to do is leave it out there. Have a big splashing presence and then a little bit of a work, and then you just want to leave it there. And you're trying to target those real pressure points, the sections of the bank where it's either dropping off or there's a convergent point, things like that, or where there's bait being pushed up, or if you see a surface hit. They're the sorts of things that you're looking for. And you've got to keep an eye on the birds, because with these big lures, the eagles and the seagulls and terns get after them. But creating a big presence on the surface with a big surface lure, for big flathead, it's tantalising stuff, and it's a lot of fun to do this style of fishing. I think it's something sort of relatively new in terms of, you know, mainstream lure fishing for giant flathead, and that's really the appeal, because the surface action that you see is just incredible. They're such a, I think, underrated fish as a sports fish, these really big flathead, that if you haven't done it before, or you haven't seen a giant flathead bust through the surface, you're really missing out. So all I'm doing is just walking the dog, and I'm watching that lure the whole time, just trying to eye it in and giving it a chance to just walk, and then just sit there. And hopefully with that body, that profile, the big presence, it's enough for a big flathead to make that decision and think, yeah, here's a meal worth moving for, worth revealing itself out of its life for. And the rest of it is basically down to you giving it the chance to come and grab it. So that's why I'm sitting at there, long stalls. That can make all the difference chasing big flathead on the flats. And I suppose the beauty of it is you can surface fish for these fish during the middle of the day. It's not necessarily a first light or late afternoon style of fishing necessarily. You can do it all day long and get action from the giants all day long. It's probably more tide dependent than anything. One of the really appealing things for me now that I'm fishing this lure, I like the finish on that. Look at the pearl finish on that and the reflective scale pattern on that thing. But really, it's the casting range that you can get with this thing. Like, that's easy. That's well over 50 meters using a bait casting setup. It just flies out there like a bullet. And for flathead, that's fantastic. But to be honest with you, I reckon this Skitter V is more designed for probably like GTs and fishing over reefs and things like that. The hooks on it that come as standard are perfect for flathead. I've just been hit there. Come on, come back. Yeah, I got it. Oh, I dropped it. Oh. Hit me like 3 times. No. What I was saying was, I reckon it's better for reef fishing and GTs. Like the flathead, they're going to love this thing. But with heavier trebles, I reckon you'd be able to get after those reef fish and have a lot of fun with this thing, fishing offshore and in the shallow water blue stuff. It's this thing at a higher speed can handle it. Like bringing this thing in, you can just walk this thing like crazy, and it's really busy on the surface. It's got like a ball in it that goes tick tock as you're bringing it in, and the way that it moves is just like a skidding bait fish. It's called the Skitter V by Rapala. And you might not have seen that surface hit. I definitely felt it the second time when it hit the hooks. But these things, they're fantastic. I haven't seen a lot of people fishing with them yet, so they might just be the go. what you want to be doing is watching it the whole time it's coming in, and I'm just working it pretty aggressive just to try and get that dog action, that walk the dog style action going. And sitting it in that disturbed water there is just ideal. That's where the carnage is, that's where the bait gets disoriented. So a lot of the time that's where the bigger flathead are going to park up. Now often it's casting into big sandbanks that's really effective, but on a rising tide, when you've got, I'll just show you, when you've got the water starting to lap the edges of these mangrove roots, that's where the bait's starting to try and hide out. So it's trying to get up in there, and the flathead often are going to sit along the edges of these mangroves. And depending where you're fishing, you know, if you're up around just north of the sunny coast and, you know, Bundaberg or north, doing that style of retrieve is super effective for mangrove jack as well. You know, if you're game enough to throw this sort of thing around and sit off like this and do it, you're a real chance of a jack.